I passed 6 funded accounts, and I blew every single one of them. We're going to bypass the typical origin story for this explainer. No long intros, no reading off a list of credentials. We're going straight into a deeply personal post-mortem of a trading trauma that, let's be honest, a lot of us share.
You know the exact visceral feeling of staring at this screen? That immediate sinking sensation in your chest? The absolute heavy silence in the room when you blow that third, fourth, or, in my case, sixth funded account. It's a very specific kind of pain.
And every single time that screen popped up, the exact same haunting question echoed in my head. What was actually wrong with me? Like, why could I pass these evaluations with such absolute precision, but then immediately blow the real capital? It just didn't make any sense.
Let's walk through this repetitive cycle, because you probably know it well. Step 1, you pass the evaluation. Step 2, you get funded. Step 3, you experience this sudden, completely inexplicable behavioral shift. And Step 4, you blow the account. And then you repeat the whole shebang. I'm naming this cycle out loud right now, totally without judgment, because if you're here with me, you need to know that someone finally understands exactly what happened to you.
For years, I was convinced the problem was technical. I totally misdiagnosed myself. I added more indicators to my charts. I hunted endlessly for better entries. I tried tightening my risk management. I even wrote stricter rules on sticky notes and put them all over my monitors. But none of that actually solved the problem. I really want to validate the sheer exhaustion you're feeling right now, because those were all false fixes for a disease we simply didn't understand.
So here is the massive pattern interruption reframe. The prop firm evaluation rules gave you something you didn't even know you were borrowing. It essentially gave you an external prosthetic. That rigid structure was doing all the emotional regulation work for you.
Think about the harsh reality of that psychological shift. Evaluation mode acts as a hard physical boundary. But the very moment you get funded, that external constraint vanishes, and it exposes a massive internal void. Whatever emotional patterns you had never actually fixed come rushing back immediately. You didn't fail because you couldn't trade, you failed because you had never built the internal architecture that the evaluation rules were substituting for.
We absolutely have to stop lazily blaming this on bad discipline in some vague, generic sense. There is a very real neurochemical mechanism at play here. In the Session Trading Lab framework, we call this discipline over dopamine, or DOD. It's the active practice of recognizing exactly when your brain is seeking stimulation and deliberately choosing structure over the quick chemical reward of taking an action. Let's break down the 3 specific dopamine-driven patterns that destroyed every single one of those accounts. First, there's that behavioral shift from evaluation to funded mode, where the sudden lack of boundaries immediately triggers anxiety. Second, the revenge cycle, right after your first significant loss, where your brain is basically demanding a dopamine hit of recovery to relieve the pain. And third, the payout pressure that creates a constant, desperate urgency in literally every session.
So, how do we actually interrupt that neurochemical revenge cycle with a hard physical boundary? 20. A 20-minute mandatory cooling period is required immediately after any stopout. No looking at charts, no analysis, and absolutely no re-entry. You have to let that dopamine spike completely subside.
This is crucial because surviving real capital under real pressure requires a total shift in your priorities. You have to protect your psychological capital long before you protect your financial capital. Survival has to come first. A trader who has a full account but a completely destroyed mental state is simply losing in slow motion.
The market always offers trades. Your edge does not. The market moves, and your brain immediately registers that movement as potential. That potential triggers dopamine, and dopamine demands action. But here's the thing. That setup was never actually valid. You just needed to feel involved. This is fundamentally a neurochemical problem dressed up as market analysis. The solution isn't adding another indicator. It's building behavioral infrastructure. This is the Session Trading Lab framework, and it naturally emerges from taking an honest look at the real problem. Step 1, an identity declaration before you even start. Step 2, pre-session mapping. Step 3, neutrality scoring. And Step 4, hard session rules.
The absolute crucial point here is redefining what consistency means. It's about consistency of self, not perfection of prediction. Consistency is defined as behavioral repeatability under uncertainty. It means executing the exact same processes, whether you are deep in a drawdown or right on the verge of a payout.
Which brings us to the most rigid requirement of this entire architecture. 7. You must possess a 7 out of 10 emotional neutrality score to even glance at the charts. If your emotional state dips below a 7, your participation is 0. Period. No exceptions.
There's a massive difference in identity happening here. Retail traders are constantly asking themselves, how many trades can I find today? They're endlessly hunting for action just to prove themselves. Professional operators, on the other hand, ask, does this environment deserve my participation? They are filtering environments specifically to protect their capital.
Let's look at the math and see how doing less actually builds a sustainable funded account. The retail trader is out there taking 10 trades a session, burning through their emotional capital with maybe a 40% win rate. The professional takes 2 trades. They strip away the emotional fatigue and variance and operate at a 70% win rate. Selectivity is your edge.
I want you to step forward into this reality for a second. You're sitting right there at your desk, the market spikes, and you suddenly realize, I can feel the impulse without immediately obeying it. You actually possess the internal architecture now to separate a neurochemical feeling from a mechanical execution.
In that state of deep calm, you finally understand that patience isn't just sitting there being passive. Patience creates precision. Doing nothing is actually a high-skill, incredibly active discipline. It is the active protection of your edge from your very own participation instinct.
Professional operators define exactly when their day is done before it even starts. The session is complete when your primary thesis plays out, or your liquidity target is reached, or your emotional state drops below that 7 out of 10, or simply the clock hits 12 p.m. Eastern. The market being open absolutely does not override these rules.
This is what consistent funded trading actually looks like. The calm session, the carefully mapped levels, clean execution, a closed platform, a truly lived life. You are no longer chained to your charts desperately seeking some kind of validation. There is a version of this where you pass the next evaluation and you actually keep it. Why? Because you built something the evaluation cannot give you and definitely cannot take away.
So let's return to the pain of that blown account. What was actually wrong? It was never the strategy. It was never the setup. And it was never the indicator. It was the absence of behavioral infrastructure precise enough to survive real capital under real pressure. But that architecture is entirely buildable, and that is exactly what this channel is about.
It all starts with a complete reframing of your purpose. Build the internal structure, protect your clarity, and reclaim your life. We trade to live. We do not live to trade. Session Trading Lab.